The sun was beginning its lazy descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor as Jonah trudged up the winding trail. His boots crunched against the gravel path, the sound a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. He loved this. The quiet, the isolation, the kind of peace that only came when you left the world behind and traded it for the woods. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, with just a hint of the wildflowers blooming in hidden pockets. Jonah adjusted his pack, the straps biting into his shoulders, and thought about the coffee waiting back at camp. A squirrel darted across the trail, its bushy tail flicking like a metronome, and Jonah chuckled. "Don't let me interrupt," he muttered. The woods were alive with their usual symphony of chirping crickets and rustling leaves when something caught his eye. A flicker of light, faint but distinct in the distance. It wasn't the kind of light you'd expect to see out here, too steady for fire, too bluish for sunlight reflecting off water. Jonah hesitated, one hand instinctively gripping the hiking stick he'd whittled down from a sturdy branch last summer. He squinted, straining to see through the thicket of trees. The light flickered again, this time accompanied by a faint hum, like the distant buzz of power lines. "Great, probably a UFO," he muttered under his breath, rolling his eyes. "Or maybe Bigfoot's throwing a rave." Still, curiosity gnawed at him. Against his better judgment, Jonah stepped off the trail and pushed through the underbrush, branches snagging at his jacket and ferns brushing against his legs. The hum grew louder, a sound that seemed to vibrate in his chest. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, just strange. He broke through a cluster of trees and froze. In the clearing stood a figure, bathed in that otherworldly glow. She was tall, taller than him by a good head, with skin that seemed to shimmer like liquid silver under the fading sunlight. Her hair, or what looked like hair, fell in soft, iridescent waves to her shoulders, each strand catching the light and refracting it like a prism. But it was her eyes that held him captive, golden, luminous, and impossibly deep, as though they contained entire galaxies. Hi?" Jonah offered, his voice cracking slightly. The figure tilted her head, an oddly human gesture that made her seem both curious and cautious. When she spoke, her voice was melodic but layered, as if 2 or 3 people were talking at once. "Do not fear. I am not hostile," she said, the words halting, as though she were tasting each one before letting it go. "Not hostile? Well, that's a relief," Jonah replied, his grip tightening on the hiking stick. "Because honestly, you look like you could bench press a bear." The alien blinked, her expression unreadable. Then, to Jonah's surprise, she reached out a hand, a human-like hand, though her fingers were longer and tipped with faintly glowing nails. "I am lost," she said simply. "Lost?" Jonah repeated, like, can't find the nearest Starbucks lost, or stranded on a planet full of weird apes lost. She frowned, or at least, Jonah thought it was a frown. Her features shifted subtly, like liquid metal settling into a new shape. "I have been here, long," she said. "My vessel is broken. I hid from the monsters." Jonah blinked. "Monsters? You mean bears? Coyotes? Bigfoot, maybe?" She shook her head. "The ones with 2 legs. They scream, they point, they chase." It took Jonah a second to realize what she meant. "Wait, are you talking about people? Like humans?" The alien nodded solemnly. "Yes, the monsters." Jonah let out a laugh, the sound sharp and incredulous. "Lady, I hate to break it to you, but I think you've got it backward. You're the one glowing in the dark and humming like an old TV set. If anyone's the monster in this scenario, it's you." She tilted her head again, clearly puzzled. "You are human?" "Last time I checked." Jonah held up his hands. No glow, no hum. Just your average guy with a caffeine addiction and questionable life choices. The alien's gaze softened, and she lowered her outstretched hand. "You are not like the others." "Well, thanks, I think." Jonah hesitated, then sighed. "All right, let's get this straight. You're lost. You've been hiding in the woods because you thought humans were monsters, and now you're asking me for help? Yes, she said simply. Jonah stared at her, then threw up his hands. Sure, why not? It's not like this is the weirdest thing that's happened to me this year. Oh wait, it definitely is. The alien's lips curved into what Jonah assumed was a smile. It was unsettling and strangely endearing at the same time. I am Iria, she said. You are… Jonah. His eyes widened. How did you know that? She tapped the side of her head. You think very loudly. Great. Mind-reading aliens. That's just perfect. Iria didn't respond, but her smile widened, and for a moment, Jonah swore he heard the faintest echo of laughter, like wind chimes caught in a breeze. Fine, he said, adjusting his pack and gripping his hiking stick. Let's get you unlost, Iria, but if you start probing my brain for secrets, we're gonna have a problem. Probe? Iria repeated, looking genuinely confused. Jonah sighed. Never mind, just follow me. And with that, the two unlikely companions disappeared into the forest, their journey only beginning. The trek back to Jonah's camp was, in a word, surreal. He'd spent years hiking these trails, learning to appreciate the solitude, the crisp mountain air, the occasional deer sighting. Now, he found himself walking alongside a literal alien who kept stopping every few feet to marvel at the mundane. Iria crouched by a cluster of moss-covered rocks, her luminous fingers brushing over the velvety green surface. This… moss. It is like the soft underlayer of the nebula kelp on Paraxis 4. Jonah adjusted his pack and raised an eyebrow. Right. Kelp totally relatable. I think I saw some of that at the farmer's market last week. Iria looked up, her golden eyes narrowing. You jest. Is this a custom of your species? It's called sarcasm, Jonah said with a grin. You'll get the hang of it. It's pretty much our national pastime. She straightened, tilting her head in that bird-like way of hers. Your culture is strange, yet amusing. Glad to know I'm entertaining, Jonah muttered, leading her through the dense underbrush. The forest was alive with its usual chatter, chirping birds, rustling leaves, the occasional scurry of unseen critters. But every now and then, Jonah would catch a faint hum emanating from Iria, like a low-frequency vibration that seemed to harmonize with the natural sounds around them. Is that you? He asked, glancing back. Iria paused mid-step, her iridescent hair catching the dappled sunlight. My form emits a resonance. It is natural. Natural for you, maybe. Out here, it's like walking next to a singing microwave. Iria frowned, or at least Jonah thought she did. Her expressions were still a bit of a mystery, like trying to read emotions off a particularly shiny sculpture. If it disturbs you, I can attempt to suppress it. Don't bother. The forest could use some background music anyway, Jonah said, waving her forward. As they trudged along, Iria's curiosity seemed boundless. She stopped to prod a fallen log with a glowing fingertip, watched intently as a squirrel darted up a tree, and even crouched by a patch of mushrooms to sniff at their caps. I wouldn't eat those if I were you, Jonah warned, unless you want to spend the next few hours hallucinating about rainbow unicorns. Iria straightened, her expression serious. Unicorns? These are creatures of great power in your culture? Jonah blinked, then burst out laughing. Oh man, you're going to be fun at parties. When they finally reached Jonah's camp, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. His modest setup, a tent, a portable stove, and a weathered camping chair, looked woefully inadequate under Iria's scrutinizing gaze. This is your dwelling? She asked, her tone teetering between confusion and mild horror. Temporary dwelling, Jonah corrected, tossing his pack onto the ground. Not all of us have fancy glowing spaceships, okay? Iria wandered over to the tent and poked at the fabric. It sagged slightly under her touch, and she recoiled as if it might bite. It is fragile. It's a tent. It's supposed to be lightweight, Jonah explained, pulling out his stove. You don't exactly need a fortress out here, unless you're scared of raccoons. Raccoons, Iria repeated, her tone grave. Are these formidable beasts? Jonah snorted. Only if you're holding a trash can lid. Then they're unstoppable. She seemed to take this seriously, her golden eyes scanning the perimeter as if expecting an ambush. Relax, Jonah said, lighting the stove. You're safe. The worst thing out here is me trying to cook. As the evening wore on, Iria's fascination with human objects reached new heights. She crouched by the stove, watching the flame with rapt attention. Your species has harnessed combustion in a miniature device. Ingenious. Jonah chuckled, stirring a pot of instant noodles. Yeah, we're real trailblazers. Wait till you see the toaster. Iria picked up his flashlight, turning it over in her hands. When she clicked it on, the beam of light shot out, causing her to yelp in surprise and drop it. It attacks, she exclaimed, her glowing nails flaring briefly in what Jonah assumed was a defensive reflex. It's not attacking, he said, retrieving the flashlight and clicking it off. It's a flashlight. You use it to see in the dark. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. And the light beam does not harm? Not unless you shine it in your eyes, which, by the way, is a rookie mistake. Iria stared at the device, then handed it back with exaggerated caution. Your technology is unpredictable. Yeah, well, it gets the job done, Jonah said, slurping his noodles. The night deepened, stars spilling across the sky in a dazzling array. Iria sat cross-legged by the fire, her shimmering skin reflecting the flickering flames. Your world, she said, her voice softer now. It is vast, beautiful, but dangerous. Jonah set down his empty bowl and leaned back in his chair. You're not wrong. Earth's a mixed bag, but it's home. Iria looked up at the stars, her expression unreadable. I miss my own home. It is far from here. A place of light and harmony. No predators. No monsters. Jonah hesitated, then offered a small smile. Sounds nice. But if you're looking for harmony, Earth's probably not the place. We're more of a chaotic jazz band. She tilted her head. Jazz. Is this another of your customs? Jonah laughed. It's music. Kind of like your hum, but with trumpets and saxophones. Way less alien-y, though. Iria's hum grew a touch louder, as if she were experimenting with the idea. Your humor, it is an odd defense mechanism. It's not just a defense, Jonah said, stretching his legs out. Sometimes you just need to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Like right now. I mean, come on, me and you? Hiking buddies? That's pretty ridiculous. Iria's lips curved into that almost smile he was starting to recognize. Yes, ridiculous. Yet, it feels less frightening. Jonah raised an imaginary toast. To ridiculous alien-human partnerships. Iria mirrored his gesture, though she seemed uncertain of its meaning. To partnerships. And as the fire crackled and the stars watched from above, the two strangers began to feel a little less like strangers. Morning arrived with a golden haze creeping through the trees, the forest stirring to life with birdsong and the distant chatter of a brook. Jonah woke to the sight of Iria crouched by the smoldering remnants of their fire, her iridescent hair catching the morning light. She seemed utterly transfixed by a pine cone she held in her delicate hands, turning it over as if it were a priceless artifact. Is this a weapon? She asked without looking up. Jonah groaned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Not unless you're fighting squirrels, and even then I wouldn't recommend it. Iria straightened, her glowing nails dimming as she set the pine cone down. Your world's objects are deceptively intricate. I find myself admiring their simplicity. Jonah yawned, stretching. Great. I'll set you up with a job at Home Depot when this is all over. Home Depot? Iria's golden eyes narrowed. Is this a location of importance? It's a hardware store. Never mind, Jonah said, chuckling. Come on, let's get moving. You've got a spaceship to show me, remember? The hike to Iria's crash site was slow, but not uneventful. She moved with a grace that made Jonah feel like a lumbering ox in comparison, her steps barely disturbing the underbrush. Along the way, she peppered him with questions about Earth's flora and fauna. "These creatures," she said, pointing to a pair of chipmunks darting through the leaves. "They hoard sustenance in their faces?" Jonah grinned. "Yeah, chipmunks are basically nature's pocket-sized hoarders. They are efficient," Iria observed, tilting her head. "Perhaps my people could learn from their methods." "Sure," Jonah replied. "Next intergalactic council meeting, just roll up with a PowerPoint on chipmunk cheeks. You'll blow their minds." As the morning wore on, the forest began to change. The trees grew denser, their trunks twisted and gnarled. A strange stillness hung in the air, the usual hum of wildlife replaced by an eerie quiet. "We are close," Iria said, her voice softer now. Jonah followed her lead, his curiosity tempered by a growing unease. After another half-hour of trekking, they emerged into a small clearing dominated by the wreckage of Iria's ship. The craft was unlike anything Jonah had imagined. Its sleek, elliptical shape was fractured, the once seamless hull now twisted and scarred. The metal gleamed with a faint iridescence, similar to Iria's skin, and strange symbols, like a language of flowing lines, were etched into its surface. "Whoa," Jonah breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. "So this is home sweet home?" Iria nodded, her expression solemn. "It was. Once." Jonah approached the ship, his footsteps crunching against the debris-strewn ground. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. Panels had been torn away, exposing a labyrinth of alien circuitry that pulsed faintly, with a dim, otherworldly light. "This thing's seen better days," Jonah said, running a hand over the cold metal. "What happened?" "A malfunction during atmospheric entry," Iria explained, crouching by an exposed console. "The systems were not calibrated for Earth's conditions." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "What, you didn't pack for bad weather?" Iria shot him a look that was equal parts exasperation and amusement. "Your planet is unpredictable." "Well, you're not wrong about that," Jonah said, crouching beside her. "So can you fix it?" She shook her head, her expression grim. "The core is damaged beyond repair. Without it, the ship cannot function." Jonah frowned, tapping a finger against the metal. "Okay, but what about communication? Can you call for help?" "There was a beacon," Iria said, her tone wistful, "but its power source depleted long ago." Jonah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Great. So you're stranded. And now I'm stuck playing the world's least qualified NASA engineer." As Iria worked to salvage what she could from the wreckage, Jonah explored the surrounding area. The crash had left a scar on the land, a swath of trees splintered and blackened, their trunks charred as if seared by fire. Yet, amidst the destruction, strange plants had taken root. Jonah knelt by a cluster of glowing bioluminescent flowers that pulsed with a faint blue light. "Hey, Iria, these yours?" She glanced over and nodded. "Seeds carried by the ship. They adapt quickly to new environments." "Well, they're beautiful," Jonah said, brushing a hand over the delicate petals. "Way better than the weeds we've got around here." Iria's lips quirked into a small smile. "Your species underestimates the resilience of weeds." Jonah chuckled. "Fair point." The afternoon passed in a blur of tinkering and failed experiments. Iria attempted to jury-rig a makeshift power source using components scavenged from the ship, while Jonah offered what little help he could. At one point, he suggested using a car battery to jump-start the systems, prompting Iria to give him a look of pure disbelief. "A car battery?" she repeated. "This is your solution?" "Hey, I'm just spitballing here," Jonah said, raising his hands defensively. To his surprise, Iria actually tried it, connecting the battery to a console with a series of improvised wires. The result was an anticlimactic spark and a faint puff of smoke. "Well," Jonah said, coughing. "At least it didn't explode." Iria sighed, the glow of her nails dimming in frustration. "Your technology is rudimentary." "Yeah, well, so is my understanding of alien engineering," Jonah shot back. By the time they called it a day, the ship was no closer to being operational. But despite their setbacks, Jonah couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with Iria. As they sat by the wreckage, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jonah turned to her. "So, what's the plan now?" Iria stared at the horizon, her golden eyes thoughtful. "We adapt. We find another way." Jonah smirked. "You're starting to sound like a human." She tilted her head, her lips curving into that almost smile. "Perhaps, but only a little." And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Jonah couldn't help but wonder if this strange, glowing woman from another world was beginning to feel a little less alien. The forest woke slowly, as it always did, with shafts of sunlight piercing the dense canopy and the chorus of birds filling the air. Jonah was already awake, crouched over his portable stove, flipping pancakes with a finesse born of years of camping trips. The faint smell of batter and sizzling butter wafted through the clearing, a stark contrast to the wreckage of Iria's ship looming in the background. "You mean to tell me," Iria said, sitting cross-legged on a nearby log, her iridescent hair catching the morning light, "that your species eats flattened, cooked batter for sustenance?" Jonah glanced over his shoulder, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "Not just any batter, these are pancakes, a human culinary masterpiece." Iria arched a glowing eyebrow. "A masterpiece? They appear primitive." "Hey, don't knock it till you try it," Jonah said, expertly flipping a pancake onto a plate and handing it to her. She examined the golden disk as though it were a mysterious artifact, then cautiously tore off a piece and placed it in her mouth. For a moment, her golden eyes widened, and the faintest hum of approval escaped her lips. "This is acceptable," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. Jonah laughed, pouring more batter onto the pan. "Careful, that's high praise coming from an intergalactic connoisseur." Iria watched him work, her expression softening. "You make light of your existence, Jonah. It is an admirable trait." "Yeah, well," Jonah said, flipping another pancake, "when life gives you lemons, you make pancakes." Iria frowned. "That phrase is logically inconsistent." "Welcome to Earth," Jonah replied, grinning. Breakfast concluded with Iria attempting, and failing, to recreate Jonah's pancake prowess. Her alien physiology, while graceful in most respects, seemed wholly unsuited to wielding a spatula. "This tool," she said, holding the spatula like it might bite her, "is poorly designed." "Blame the tool all you want," Jonah teased, leaning back against a tree, "but I think the pancakes are winning this round." Iria shot him a look that might have been annoyance or amusement. It was hard to tell. "Your humor is becoming tiresome." "Yeah, but you'd miss it if I stopped," Jonah said, smirking. She didn't respond, but the faint flicker of a smile on her lips said enough. With their makeshift breakfast behind them, the two set off into the forest. Iria had identified a series of anomalies during her scans of the shipwreck, faint signals that suggested there might be other remnants of her technology scattered throughout the area. "It is possible," she explained as they walked, "that components from the ship were ejected during the crash. If we recover them, they may prove useful." Jonah nodded, adjusting his pack. "Sounds like a plan. Let's just hope we don't run into any of those monsters you keep mentioning." Iria glanced at him, her expression serious. "The creatures I glimpsed were formidable, large, with sharp appendages. I avoided them at all costs." Jonah frowned. "You sure you weren't just looking at bears? Because, those aren't exactly monsters, just big, fluffy jerks." Your definition of jerk is peculiar, Iria said, tilting her head. Yeah, well, stick with me long enough, and you'll learn all kinds of colorful Earth vocabulary, Jonah replied. The first signal led them to a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow ravine. As they approached, Iria's glowing nails flared, her resonance humming faintly. There, she said, pointing to a jagged piece of metal lodged in the rocks. Jonah climbed up to retrieve it, the sunlight glinting off the shard's iridescent surface. It was lightweight yet incredibly sturdy, the edges etched with the same alien symbols that adorned Iria's ship. Got it, he said, handing the shard to her. So, what's this thing do? Is it like a laser cannon or something? Iria examined the piece, her expression unreadable. It is a fragment of the stabilization system, not a weapon. Boring, Jonah said, shrugging, but I guess it's better than nothing. On the second signal, took them deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the light dimmed. Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though every time he glanced over his shoulder, there was nothing but swaying branches and rustling leaves. You sure these signals aren't just leading us into an alien bear trap? He asked, only half joking. Iria stopped abruptly, her golden eyes scanning the underbrush. Something is nearby. Jonah froze, his heart pounding. Something like, what? Before she could answer, a low growl rumbled through the air, followed by the snap of a branch. Jonah turned just in time to see a hulking shape emerge from the shadows.
It wasn't a bear. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall, its sleek chitinous shimmering in the faint light. 4 clawed arms extended from and its head with massive, writhing tendrils that glowed faintly. Well, Jonah said, his voice not a raccoon. The creature advanced slowly, its tendrils twitching as it sniffed the air. Iria stepped forward, her glowing nails flaring brighter, staying her voice firm. Jonah didn't argue. He crouched low, his heart hammering as Iria emitted a low-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate was not fooled. He knew better than to trust a peaceful morning in a world that apparently housed alien bodies. Let me guess, he said, glancing at Iria as she sifted through the salvaged components from her ship. Radar that'll warn us if Big Ugly comes back, right? Iria didn't look up. I am recalibrating the resonance module to detect non-terrestrial life forms, but its range is limited. Great. Joan at the campfire with a stick. So basically, we're playing hide and seek with a monster, and we're blindfolded. Iria tilted her head, her cold eyes narrowing. Exaggeration is how humans go. Jonah shot back. It's either that or screaming into the void, and I didn't bring my void screaming gear. Work, her lips curving into a faint smile. Your humor is remarkably persistent, said with a mock bow. I'll add it to my resume under alien diplomacy skills. With the morning's tension diffused by banter, they set off once again. Following the faint signals, Iria had managed to triangulate. Their destination lay deeper within the forest, in a region she described as resonance ridge. Jonah, as they walked, is that alien force super creepy?
It refers to the heightened electromagnetic activity in the area, Iria explained. It suggests the presence of technology, or something that interacts with it. Jonah raised an eyebrow. Like more pieces of your ship? Or, more alien death bugs? Either is possible, Iria admitted, her tone maddeningly calm. Fantastic, Jonah muttered. This day just keeps getting better. Their journey took them through increasingly rugged terrain. The trees grew taller, their trunks twisted and ancient, and the ground was littered with moss-covered stones. Jonah's boots squelched in patches of mud, while Iria moved with her usual effortless grace, barely leaving a mark on the forest floor. You know, Jonah said, panting slightly as they climbed a steep incline, it's not fair that you don't even break a sweat. Are aliens just naturally good at hiking? Or is this some kind of advanced cardio program? Iria glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. My physiology is optimized for efficiency. I do not sweat. Of course you don't, Jonah said, shaking his head. Meanwhile, I'm over here turning into a human sprinkler. Iria's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. Perhaps you require optimization. Jonah laughed, despite himself. Yeah, sign me up for the alien upgrade package. Just skip the glowing nails. I'm not sure I could pull them off. By midday, they reached a small clearing dominated by a massive tree whose roots clawed into the ground like the fingers of a sleeping giant. At its base lay the source of the signal, a spherical device half buried in the earth. Iria approached it cautiously, her glowing nails dimming as she knelt beside the sphere. Its surface was smooth and metallic, with faint lines that pulsed like veins of liquid light. This is a data node, she said, brushing dirt away from its surface. It contains records of my ship's systems and journey. Jonah crouched beside her, peering at the sphere. So it's like a black box? Cool. Can you read it? Iria nodded, placing her hands on the sphere. Her nails flared brighter as the lines on the device pulsed in response. A soft hum filled the air, and a series of holographic projections sprang to life around them. Jonah stared, wide-eyed, as alien symbols and diagrams floated in the air, their intricate patterns mesmerizing. Okay, that's officially the coolest thing I've ever seen. Iria didn't respond, her focus entirely on the data. As the projections shifted and reorganized, her expression grew darker. What is it? Jonah asked, his voice low. Iria hesitated before answering. The data confirms what I suspected. My ship did not malfunction by chance. It was sabotaged. Jonah blinked. Wait, what? Someone blew up your ship? Who? Iria's golden eyes met his, and for the first time, Jonah saw something like fear in them. "I do not know, but if they followed me here—" Her words were cut off by a sudden high-pitched whine that sent a shiver down Jonah's spine. The holograms flickered and died, and the data node emitted a series of rapid, stuttering beeps. Iria?" Jonah said, backing away. "Is it supposed to do that?" "No," she said, rising to her feet. "Something is interfering with its systems." As if on cue, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Jonah stumbled, catching himself against the tree. "Please tell me this is just an alien earthquake," he said, his voice tight. Iria didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the edge of the clearing, where the underbrush was shaking violently. And then it appeared. The creature was larger than the one they had encountered before, its chitinous body glistening like polished obsidian. Its 4 clawed arms were thicker, its tendrils longer, and its blue glow more intense. "Oh, come on!" Jonah shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Did it call for backup?" Iria stepped forward, her glowing nails flaring to full brightness. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice steady. "Yeah, no problem," Jonah replied, gripping the nearest stick he could find. "I'll just cheer you on from over here." The battle that followed was both terrifying and oddly mesmerizing. Iria moved like a dancer, her strikes precise and calculated. The creature, however, was faster than its predecessor, its claws striking out in rapid, unpredictable patterns. Jonah, for his part, did his best to stay out of the way, while shouting unhelpful commentary. "Watch out for the claws," he yelled as Iria narrowly dodged a swipe. "Thank you, Jonah," she replied, her tone dry. "I had not noticed." "You're welcome," he called back, swinging his stick at a tendril that got too close. After what felt like an eternity, Iria managed to land a decisive blow, severing one of the creature's arms. It let out a guttural screech and retreated, its glowing tendrils flickering as it disappeared into the forest. Iria exhaled, her glow dimming as she turned to Jonah. "It is gone, for now." "Yeah, great," Jonah said, collapsing onto the ground. Because fighting one of those things once wasn't traumatic enough. Iria glanced at him, her lips curving into that faint, almost smile. "Your survival instincts are adequate." "Thanks," Jonah said, dragging a hand through his hair. "I think." As they made their way back to camp with the salvaged data node, Jonah couldn't help but wonder who or what was behind the sabotage of Iria's ship. One thing was certain. Their journey had just become a lot more complicated, and Jonah had a sinking feeling that his stick wasn't going to cut it next time. The return to camp was quieter than Jonah preferred. Usually, he could count on Iria to dissect every odd thing he said, or to throw one of her sly, understated remarks back at him. But tonight, her focus was elsewhere, on the glowing data node tucked under her arm, and on the unspoken weight of the revelation that her crash hadn't been an accident. "So," Jonah said, finally breaking the silence as they reached the campfire, "you're telling me someone out there sabotaged your ship, and now we're stuck playing scavenger hunt while Godzilla's arthropod cousin keeps crashing the party?" Iria set the data node down carefully on the ground, her expression calm but tense. "The situation is not ideal, but it is manageable." "Manageable," Jonah echoed, dropping his pack with a thud. "Sure, because nothing says manageable like being ambushed by alien murder bugs every other day." Iria didn't respond immediately. She was already focused on the node, her glowing nails tapping out a rhythm against its surface that made Jonah think of someone tuning a very temperamental instrument. "Okay," Jonah said, crouching beside her. "I'll bite. What are you doing now?" "Attempting to bypass the interference that disrupted the data stream earlier," Iria replied without looking up. "If successful, the node may provide coordinates for the remaining components, or additional information regarding the sabotage." "Right," Jonah said, watching her work. "So, like, hacking?" Iria glanced at him, her golden eyes faintly amused. If it simplifies the concept for you, then yes. Hacking. Cool, Jonah said, leaning back on his elbows. You ever consider using your skills to, I don't know, steal cable? Hack into alien Netflix? Iria paused, her head tilting slightly. Netflix? Never mind, Jonah said quickly. Just carry on with the space magic. The node emitted a low hum, its glowing lines flickering in response to Iria's manipulations. Jonah found himself strangely mesmerized by the way her hands moved, precise, deliberate, as if she were coaxing the answers out of the machine rather than forcing them. Do you ever miss it? He asked suddenly. Iria's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed their work. Miss what? Home, Jonah said. Your planet, your people, all the alien stuff. Iria didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. I do not allow myself to dwell on what I cannot change. Jonah frowned. That's not really an answer. She looked at him then, her expression unreadable. Is it not? And before Jonah could press her further, the data node let out a soft chime, and a series of holograms sprang to life once more. This time, the projections were clearer, the alien symbols rearranging themselves into something resembling a map. Coordinates, Iria said, her tone triumphant. Great, Jonah said, squinting at the holograms. And where exactly are they pointing us? To a location approximately 20 kilometers from here, Iria replied, studying the map. If the data is accurate, it contains a critical component of the ship's power core. Jonah raised an eyebrow. And let me guess, this critical component is also in a resonance-rich area, which probably means more giant bug monsters? Unlikely, Iria said. Unlikely? Jonah repeated. That's not exactly comforting. Iria's lips curved into that faint, almost smile he was beginning to recognize as her version of a joke. Your concern is noted. The next morning, they set out early, following the map's coordinates into the heart of the forest. The terrain grew steeper as they climbed higher into the hills, and Jonah found himself wondering how he'd managed to get roped into an intergalactic scavenger hunt with someone who didn't even sweat. So, he said as they paused to catch their breath, or rather, as Jonah caught his breath while Iria looked mildly curious about the concept of fatigue. This power core thing we're looking for, how big is it? Are we talking like the size of a toaster, a car, a small house? It is approximately 1 meter in diameter, Iria replied. Okay, Jonah said, nodding. So, somewhere between a beach ball and a yoga ball. Got it. Iria tilted her head. Your analogies are strange. Thanks, Jonah said with a grin. I aim to impress. The coordinates led them to a rocky plateau overlooking a valley shrouded in mist. At the center of the plateau stood a monolithic structure made of the same iridescent metal as Iria's ship, its surface etched with intricate alien symbols that pulsed faintly with light. Well, that's not ominous at all, Jonah said, eyeing the structure warily. This is the retrieval site, Iria said, approaching the monolith. The power core should be contained within. Jonah followed her, his unease growing as they drew closer. Should be? That's not exactly reassuring. Iria placed her hands on the monolith, her nails glowing brighter as the symbols began to shift and rearrange themselves. What are you doing? Jonah asked, taking a cautious step back. Unlocking the containment field, Iria replied, her voice steady. Uh-huh, Jonah said. And what happens if you accidentally trigger a self-destruct sequence or something? Iria glanced at him, her expression calm. Then I suggest you run. Jonah blinked. That was a joke, right? Please tell me that was a joke. Her lips curved into that faint, teasing smile. Perhaps. With a final, resonant hum, the monolith split open, revealing a glowing sphere suspended within. The power core was mesmerizing, its surface swirling with patterns of light that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Wow, Jonah said, staring at the sphere. That's actually kind of beautiful. Iria reached out, carefully extracting the core from its containment field. The moment she touched it, the sphere's light intensified, casting a golden glow over the plateau. "Is that supposed to happen?" Jonah asked, squinting against the brightness. "Yes," Iria said, her voice soft. "It recognizes me." "Well, that's good," Jonah said, relaxing slightly. "Because if it didn't, I was fully prepared to run screaming into the woods." Iria gave him a sidelong glance, her faint smile returning. "Your survival instincts are improving." "Thanks," Jonah said. "I think." As they began the journey back to camp, Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that retrieving the power core had been almost too easy. "Hey, Iria," he said after a while, "doesn't this whole thing feel a little convenient to you? Like, what if the sabotage wasn't just about crashing your ship? What if someone wanted you to come here?" Iria's expression darkened. "It is a possibility I have considered." "Great," Jonah muttered. "So we're not just scavenger hunting, we're walking into a trap." Iria's golden eyes met his, calm but resolute. "If it is a trap, then we will face it. Together." Jonah sighed, shaking his head. "You know, for someone who doesn't sweat, you sure know how to make a guy nervous." Iria's lips twitched. "Your humor is remarkably persistent." "Yeah," Jonah said, grinning despite himself, "and you'd miss it if I stopped." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest, Jonah couldn't help but wonder what awaited them in the final pieces of Iria's puzzle, and whether they were ready to face it. The day of reckoning began in the dim light of dawn, the kind of morning that made the forest look like it had secrets to tell if you listened hard enough. Jonah sat by the fire, cradling a steaming tin mug of coffee that tasted like regret and burnt twigs. Across from him, Iria methodically packed her belongings with the efficiency of someone used to leaving things behind. "So," Jonah said, breaking the silence, "we've got all the pieces, you've fixed your doodads, and now we just waltz into your alien garage and fire up the engine?" "Essentially," Iria replied, not looking up. Jonah sipped his coffee. "Great. Love a simple plan. Simple plans never go horribly wrong." Iria finally met his gaze, her golden eyes steady. "If you are afraid, you may remain here." Jonah snorted. "Oh, sure. I'll just hang out in the woods with the bugs and the bears while you deal with whoever sabotaged your ship." "No problem." Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Your bravery is noted." Jonah grinned. "I'll add it to my resume under alien repair technician." The final journey to the crash site felt heavier than Jonah had expected. The air seemed thicker, the forest quieter, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The clearing where Iria's ship lay dormant was as he remembered, a jagged scar in the earth, the massive vessel still half buried and wreathed in vines. Iria approached the ship with purpose, the retrieved power core cradled in her hands. Jonah followed, his nerves humming like a live wire. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, glancing around the clearing as if expecting a welcoming committee of alien saboteurs. "I will reintegrate the power core," Iria said, her glowing nails beginning to pulse as she interfaced with the ship's exterior. "Once the systems are online, we will assess the ship's condition and determine our next steps." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Our next steps? Does that mean you're inviting me to come along, or are you planning to drop me off at the nearest spaceport?" Iria didn't answer immediately, her focus on the ship's controls. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. "Your presence has been unexpectedly valuable." Jonah blinked. "Was that a compliment?" "Do not let it go to your head," Iria said, though the faint smile tugging at her lips suggested she didn't entirely mind his reaction. As Iria worked, Jonah found himself wandering around the clearing, his thoughts spiraling in all directions. The journey they'd taken together, the dangers they'd faced, the revelations they'd uncovered, felt like a lifetime compressed into days. He stopped in front of a twisted piece of metal jutting from the ground, its surface etched with alien symbols that glowed faintly in the fading light. Running his fingers over the strange markings, he felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. "You okay?" he asked, glancing back at Iria. She paused, her golden eyes meeting his. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know," Jonah said, shrugging. "You just seem distracted. I mean, more than usual." Iria hesitated, then stepped closer to him. "There is much to consider. The sabotage, the journey ahead, and the likelihood that I will not return to this planet." Jonah swallowed hard, suddenly feeling the weight of her words. "Yeah, I guess that's kind of a big deal." "It is," Iria said quietly. The ship's systems roared to life with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground. Lights flickered on across the vessel's surface, casting eerie shadows across the clearing. "Whoa," Jonah said, stepping back as the ship's engines began to emit a low, rhythmic pulse. "I'm guessing that means it worked?" "Yes," Iria said, her voice steady but tinged with something Jonah couldn't quite place. Relief? Sadness? Both? "So, what now?" he asked, shoving his hands into his pockets. Iria turned to him, her expression calm but serious. "The ship is functional. I must leave, to return to my people, to uncover the truth behind the sabotage, and to ensure that those responsible are brought to justice." Jonah nodded slowly, his chest tightening. "Right. Makes sense." He tried to sound nonchalant, but the idea of Iria leaving, of their strange, exhilarating partnership coming to an end, hit harder than he'd expected. "You could come with me," Iria said suddenly, her golden eyes searching his face. Jonah blinked. "Wait, what?" "I am offering you a choice," she said, "to remain here or to join me." Jonah stared at her, his mind racing. Leave Earth? Explore the galaxy? It sounded like something out of a dream, or one of his weirder camping trips. But then he thought about the life he'd left behind when he'd set out on this hike. The dead-end job, the endless routines, the feeling that he was just coasting. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Iria nodded. "I would not offer if I were not." The decision wasn't easy, but in the end, it felt right. As Iria prepared the ship for departure, Jonah gathered his few belongings, feeling a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. "So," he said as he stepped aboard the ship's sleek interior, "is there some kind of orientation program for humans joining alien crews, like a handbook, a don't press this button or you'll blow up the ship guide?" Iria glanced at him, her lips curving into that faint, familiar smile. "I will provide instruction as necessary." "Great," Jonah said, grinning. "Just don't expect me to remember all the alien jargon. I'm a slow learner." "I had noticed," Iria said dryly, though there was a warmth in her tone that made Jonah's chest feel lighter. As the ship lifted off, the forest fell away beneath them, its dense canopy fading into a patchwork of green and gold. Jonah pressed his face to the viewport, his breath catching as they broke through the clouds and into the infinite expanse of stars. "Wow," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Iria stood beside him, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. "You are prepared for this journey?" Jonah turned to her, his grin wide and unrestrained. "Not even a little bit. But that's never stopped me before." Her faint smile widened just enough to reveal a glimpse of teeth. "Then let us begin." As the ship surged into the unknown, Jonah felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose, of possibility, and for the first time he realized that maybe, just maybe, getting lost in the forest had been the best thing that ever happened to him.